Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life. Today we have a special bonus episode for all of you. If you've been following along since the beginning, we really appreciate your support. And if you've gotten anything out of this podcast, I'd love it if you could rate us and give us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. And if this is your first episode, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, let me know if there are any questions you want me to ask future guests. Feel free to email me at l@hoopsthroughlife. That's EL@hoopsthroughlife. As you know, new interview episodes drop the first and third Wednesday of each and every month. With this being the fifth Wednesday, this episode is a little bit different because I don't have a guest today, but I thought it would be beneficial if I did a recap of all of the guests we've had so far, just my highlights, themes, and key takeaways. Before we get started, I want to talk about how I generally work with student athletes and their families. We start with a no obligation conversation about your questions and concerns with the recruiting process. And if we decide to move forward, we will have monthly or bi-monthly one-on-one meetings where I address any concerns you're having and how overwhelmed you're feeling about the recruiting process. And we do a deep dive into what you're looking for at the next level. I will develop a highly personalized recruiting plan for you to make your aspirations a reality, getting you on the right college roster. With your input, we will develop your interest list criteria, and I will create a social media plan, a communication plan, and a follow-up plan. I will review a full game and a highlight film and provide feedback on both. We will go over do's and don'ts on visits, navigating the decision-making process, and a successful transition into your first year as a college student athlete. Because we cannot forget the goal of the recruiting process is not to get recruited and post that picture on social media. It's to have a successful 4-year career on and off the court. And I want to repeat that because I think it's worth emphasizing. The point of the recruiting process is to have a successful 4-year career on and off the court. I can help you find the right fit, and I take the time to understand what that right fit means for you. This option is only for serious student athletes who are willing to invest the time into the recruiting process. If that sounds like you, click the link in the show notes to set up a free call with me where we can talk in more detail and I can understand how exactly I can best serve you. No matter if we work together or not, I will always do whatever I can to point you in the right direction. All right, so let's first talk about the recruiting process as a whole. I'll break it down into 4 sections. 1, preparation. 2, communication. 3, visits. And 4, the decision-making process and transition to college. So just please remember, all of this is information taken from previous interviews that I've done with guests. I take diligent notes as we're doing the interview, when I listen back to edit the interviews, and this is what I've come up with that I think is noteworthy for you all to understand in a condensed period of time. All right, so let's talk about preparation. So this phase is all about reflecting on what you want and understanding that this is your process and you have to treat it as such. That means being proactive and reaching out to schools and doing research on schools that reach out to you. Seeing how they fit into what you want for your future. You really want to put the things that you can control in the forefront of your recruiting process. So you really want to take ownership of that process and have an idea of your non-negotiables. Some non-negotiables are, what location do you want to be in? Do you want your parents to be able to easily come to games? Are you okay with a plane ride home? Would you prefer a train ride? Is that okay? Or do you want a car ride? So thinking about what location you want to be in from the frame of how accessible are maybe my parents, or how accessible is the area to public transportation or even grocery shopping? Do you want to be able to, maybe Friday night you have practice, you leave, you take a shower, leave practice, get home Friday night to your parents' house, spend all day Saturday with them, maybe you have an off day, and then you come back on Sunday before your next practice. Is that something that you want? Really think about that. And then, is the quality of the basketball or the quality of the school and academics most important to you? I will say no answer is wrong. It's really based on what you want for your future, what you want your college experience to look like. But recognizing what's important to you will help inform the rest of your recruiting process. And that makes it a lot easier as you're filtering through coaches and conversations when you really understand and have a good idea of who you are and what you're looking for. And the last thing that's important to remember in this preparation phase is what level can you realistically play at? Let's say your dream school is Dream School X, and they are recruiting you and they're saying, yes, we like you, we want you to come here, but we have this person in your position and you will most likely learn from them for the first 2 years. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with sitting on the bench? Or do you want to have a more immediate impact? Again, no answer is right or wrong. It's what is important to you and what can you actually live with at the end of the day. And honestly, what I would do if I were you listening to this podcast right now, I might even just pause it and really take 5, 10, 15 minutes, jot down the answers to what you're really thinking about for the next level. What are your non-negotiables as you're going through the recruiting process? All right, the next stage, communication. So I think what's really important to remember when you start thinking about communication and developing relationships with college coaches is this relationship is generally at least a year-long process. And depending on the division level, depending on the school, it could be up to 3 to 4 years of a process. That's a long time to communicate with somebody and to build a relationship. And then not to mention, the next 4 plus years that you will get to know these coaches, your future teammates, all of that. Sending emails. We talk a lot about sending emails on this podcast, and I feel very confident in how I've streamlined what coaches are looking for in the emails. So again, if you're taking notes, I would write this down. So you want to include demographics information. That's height, position, GPA. Include your transcript if you have it, graduation year, your high school, your AAU team, and any accomplishments that you might have on and off the court. On the court might be maybe you made honorable mention or first team or second team. You were the MVP in your state tournament, whatever it is, include that. All it is a sentence. Off the court, it could be maybe you're part of the National Honor Society. Maybe you presented in the science fair or this county, I don't know, whatever it is that you are doing off the court and you're proud of it, just include it. Film. Full game and highlight film. You want the coaching staff to get a good picture of who you are and what you have to offer, the good and the bad. No player is going to be perfect going in to their first year of college. No player in college is perfect. There's always things that you're going to have to work on. And so you want to make sure the coaching staff knows who you are as a player, just like you want to make sure you know who they are as a coach. How do they motivate their players? How do they speak to their players in practice, out of practice, during games? You want to make sure you understand all of those factors, because the worst thing that can happen is you get to a school and you both realize this isn't what you signed up for. Maybe they didn't completely know you as a player and a person, and maybe you didn't completely know them as a coach and a person as well. So you really want to make sure that you get to know fully who's recruiting you, just like you want them to get to know who they're recruiting. All right, the last thing in that email is your why. Why are you interested in that institution? It doesn't need to be long, just a few sentences that shows you put some thought in that email. Is it because of a specific academic program that they have, or is it another reason? Is it the location? Just let them know why you're reaching out to them. All right, so just to recap on the emails: demographics, film, your why. Simple. Don't overcomplicate that. And then always email your tournament schedules to schools that you're interested in a week before you play. Now, I understand that most tournaments, their schedules may not come out, maybe they come out a week before, maybe they don't. but there are inevitably changes that happen to that schedule, whether that's the day of, the day before, 2 days before, but you want to include that schedule in that email that you send. So as soon as you get the schedule, email it, because coaches sit down and map out their plan for the recruiting tournament. They will sit down, it's like a puzzle, that they are going to court 7 at this time, and then they have to book it to court 14, and then they have to go back to court 1. And so they're really mapping things out. It's like a puzzle, and you want to be one of those puzzle pieces that they place on their chart. And understand, if you reach out to the coach, more often than not, they will find a way to at least glance by your court, whether that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a whole half, a whole game. They will do everything in their power to get to that court. So you really want to email those schedules. And then with social media, it's helpful to have. You want to put some highlights on your profile, pin highlights to your profile, because a lot of times as coaches are sitting on the sideline and they see, ooh, I like that player, the number 13 on that team, easily pulls out their phone, types in their name. What's the first thing that comes up? Social media a lot. And they'll click on that and they'll look, see who you are, what you're posting, but more importantly, like highlights. If you have highlights pinned, that's really important too. With that, I don't know any coach really who does not Google a potential student athlete, period. So you really want to be careful about what you post and what you repost. Now, I don't be paralyzed, but coaches understand that you're 14 to 17 years old. And they can understand that there's teaching to be due, learning to have, but it might give them pause if they see something. And you don't want the difference between you getting an offer and somebody else getting an offer be because of something you posted or you reposted. And I think one thing that's important to realize is, as anybody who is using social media, a lot of times I think people just repost things without thinking, right? You see something, you're like, oh, I kind of agree with that. Oh, that's inspirational. Oh, it has 1,000 reposts. I'm going to repost it too. And you don't really know all the facts or the context behind that post. And so I think that just do your research, do your homework. Don't just mindlessly repost things just because you think it sounds good. Let's talk about visits. I would encourage any student athlete, any person really who wants to go to college and has a college decision, to go to as many college campuses as you can. If you live in an area with a lot of college campuses, go see some, if not all of them. You don't have to be interested in that school to take a walk, to run through campus, to do any of those things, because the more you get exposed to college campuses, the more you understand what a college campus is like. And the more you understand what different college campuses are like, you get an idea of, ooh, I like this. I want to add this to my list of maybe non-negotiable things I'm looking for in a campus. Or, ooh, I really don't like that. I'm going to add that to the list of like non-negotiables in a bad way that I don't want on a college campus. So as much as you can, go to college campuses. And if you want to set up a visit, if it's, an unofficial visit, let's say you're playing at a tournament in Kentucky or Pennsylvania or Ohio, and there's a school that you might be interested in, there's nothing wrong with driving through the campus. But if you're interested in playing basketball at that school, you definitely want to at least meet a coach. Any of the coaches, talk to them, whether it's 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. You want to put a face to them, let them know that you're interested, and just talk to them. Give the coaching staff at least a week's notice, and just make sure that if it's at a school where they abide by a specific recruiting calendar, make sure that you're abiding by those rules as well. But you want to give them that notice so that they can plan to meet you. Because most coaches want to meet prospective student athletes on campus. They'll do what they can to make it there. Definitely come with questions. So this is more so a more formalized visit. It can be an unofficial visit where maybe the coaches are showing you around campus, introducing you to some of the teams, the people on campus. Maybe you're going to a practice or a game, or it can be an official visit, which is a little bit more serious. You might be staying overnight. There's definitely an itinerary in place for that. So, but you want to come with questions. And come with specifically, there's a lot of questions that we can talk about, but more so from the basketball standpoint, asking the hard questions, which means you have to be ready for some hard truths. So questions like, where does the coaching staff see you on their depth chart, is a really important question to ask, because then you get an idea of where they're at in the recruiting process. And you can dig into that a little bit deeper. How many people are you recruiting at my position? Where do I land on that list? What do you need to see from me to jump up that list? All of those things are very important questions, and don't be afraid to ask them. Because again, this goes back to, this is your recruiting process. It's your decision, and you need to make sure that you have all the facts. And if you don't ask the coaches, they might not think that you even care. They're doing things on their end too. It's not their responsibility to know what you're thinking and what questions you might have. All right, now to the decision-making and transition process. As you're making your decision, I think there's a couple questions to ask yourself and to think about and reflect on as you're making this decision. One, the most important being, would you choose that school if basketball was canceled? So everybody went through the pandemic. Everybody had seasons of basketball canceled. That happened then. I hope it never happens again, but you never know what can happen. So let's say basketball was off the table. Would you enjoy your time at that institution? Always encourage making a pro-con list. Pro-con list. And that means making sure that you take notes throughout the recruiting process. Get a notebook, get something to keep together everything from your recruiting to make it that much easier when you're at the point of making a decision. Because remember, this is at least a year-long process. And I don't know about you, but if somebody were to ask me, what did I do 2 months ago at a specific day and a specific time and what I thought, I would have no idea. Your memory is not what you think it is. So always take notes and have something to reference. And coaches understand that this is a hard decision. The decision on where you're going to spend the next 4 years isn't easy, but coaches do expect communication about your timeline. And the same, you can expect the same from them, the communication on their timeline and what they're thinking when they want to offer people and when they want to finish up their class. So it's a two-way street of communication. It is a hard decision. You want to make sure that you think it out thoroughly, but you also want to make sure you're open and honest about the communication to the coaches, your potential coaches. Last but not least, the transition. Strength is a major factor at the next level. You'll be going up against women who have been lifting and playing physically against other people who have been lifting for 1, 2, 3 years, sometimes more. With the COVID year, you need to get your body ready. Physically, strength-wise. That's one thing. But then the other thing is focus on the strengths and skills you were recruited for. If you're a knockdown shooter, a knockdown defender, and throughout the whole entire recruiting process, your future coaches have said, man, we love this about you. We love how you can I know that if we need a 3, boom, I can go to you and you can hit that. I know if we need to get a stop, I'm going to stick you on their best player. If you know that that's what your value is to the team, that is what you want to focus on the summer leading into that first year. And this goes back to the idea that the goal of the recruiting process is not to get recruited. It's to have a successful career in college. And if your coaches are telling you this is what we're recruiting you for, they're not trying to trick you. I promise you, they're not trying to trick you. That's the things that's going to get you on the floor. So just make sure you're honing in on the strengths and the skills that you were recruited for. So if you've been following the pod, you'll know that the first question I ask to the guests is what draws them in about student athletes. And so I just wanted to create a mini list of some of the answers that I've gotten so far. And so here it is. So toughness. So not scared of contact, driving to the rim, going after rebounds, mistake response. That's something that multiple coaches mentioned. The pieces that they're missing that year. So filling a gap on their roster. And I think the important thing to note about that is you might be good, but just not what they're looking for. Defensive intensity, playing hard, body language, shot selection, and ability to put the ball in the rim. And those two things I think are important to put together, shot selection and the ability to put the ball in the rim. So shot selection meaning you're taking good shots, not any shot. And I don't want people to get confused and think, oh, I got to just shoot a million times because I got to show that I can put the ball in the rim. No, shot selection is just as important. But my biggest takeaway from that list is if you have the foundational skills, what is going to separate you is the mental and intangible side of the game. So how hard do you play? What do you look like on defense? Are you talking to your teammates? How are you talking to your teammates? How well do you respond when you make a mistake? I don't want to misinform people. Those intangibles aren't enough to get you to the next level if you don't have certain foundational skills. But I did want to emphasize that if the foundational skills are there, that is what is going to separate you. So I think we've had some great guests on the podcast. They've all been super generous with their time and their knowledge. And if you want an inside look into how the coaches who are recruiting you view the recruiting process, just go through the episodes and just listen. I promise you, these aren't repeat conversations week after week. Each coach has their own set of experiences and thoughts on the recruiting process. So next week, we will have another episode, and June is packed with 2 more awesome guests. On June 5th, we will have Coach Tanaya Davis, who is an assistant and director of player development at the University of Iowa. And then on June 19th, you'll hear from the associate head coach at St. Joseph's University, Melissa Dunn. 2 great conversations you won't want to miss. And if you're feeling overwhelmed or don't know where to start in the recruiting process and are interested in learning more about how we can work together, click the link in the podcast description to schedule a 30 to 60 minute call with me. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great week.